In this lesson, we'll learn the difference between traditional linear perspective and isometric projection. Alright, so maybe you come from a more traditional illustrative background, and maybe you're not familiar with the terms isometric projection. Maybe the terms linear perspective are a lot more familiar with you. So let's talk about linear perspective first here and really talk about what that is. Essentially, linear perspective is just a drawing system. It's a set of rules that allow you to recreate a three-dimensional object in a two-dimensional space. Now, if you're familiar with traditional linear perspective, you understand that it's a vanishing point based system. So you can see here we have three different versions of linear perspective. Starting up here in the top left hand corner, we have our 1 point perspective. You can see we have one vanishing point. Now, a linear perspective includes really three basic tools that help you build this three-dimensional object. You have your horizon line, you have your vanishing point, and then these little dashed lines would indicate perspective lines. So in moving down here, you can see here we have a 2 point perspective. And again, we have our vanishing points, our horizon line, and our perspective lines here. So 2 point perspective has two vanishing points, and then you see a basic 3 point perspective here with a third vanishing point being added. Now, notice here that in each one of these different forms of linear perspective, we've got a different portion of our object that's closest to us. In the 1 point perspective, we have a face of our cube here that's closest to us. In our 2 point perspective, we have an edge of this object that's the closest to us. And according to the 3 point perspective, we've got a corner here that appears to be closest to us. So based on whichever form of linear perspective we're using here, you can see there's an amount of visual distortion being placed on the object that we're recreating. You can see that it appears to recede into the distance. So if you're familiar with linear perspective, none of this is going to be new to you. This should all look fairly familiar. So let's go ahead and move on and talk about isometric projection for just a moment. So essentially, isometric projection is just another different type of drawing system. So let's go ahead and take a look at this next artboard here, and we'll just zoom in here on these two cubes at the top, and you can see here on the left we've got a cube as rendered based on a linear perspective with two vanishing points. And on the right you can see here we have the same cube rendered using isometric projection. Now, isometric projection is really a part of axonometric projection, and really there's a lot of math involved to get to this result right here. And the challenge here is I'm not going to present you with a lot of math. I want to approach this from a more artistic standpoint and just learn the basics of this this drawing system so we can learn how to work within the set of rules that are contained here. So if we come over here and take a look at this cube right here, I've gone ahead and added in our x-axes, our y-axes, and our z-axes. And we can see here that they're covered up by the cube. Now, if we go ahead and peel away these top three faces in our cube, being this top face, this left face, and this right face, let's go ahead and move over here to the right and see what we're left with. So you can see here we have three additional faces that were hidden by these frontmost faces. Now, again, we've got a left, a right, and now we've got a bottom face instead of that top face. So now we can see our x, y, and z axes a little clearer. And what you should understand about isometric projection is that the angle between each of these axes is equal. So we have a 120-degree angle between each the x and the y and the z and the x. So you can see that represented here. Now, if we think about this in terms of a horizontal line, let's go ahead and show a horizontal and a vertical line in comparison to this isometric cube. And you can see here that in relation to this horizontal line, we have a 30-degree angle here, and then a 60-degree angle here. So if we had a grid made up of only 30-degree angles, then we could draw pretty much everything that we needed to draw using isometric projection. Now, some common areas where maybe you've seen isometric projection in use and really not recognized it before is maybe in a technical drawing or an engineering type rendering, very technical type illustration in that fashion. Another really common place that isometric projection is used is in pixel art or video game art. Now feel free to do a little research on your own if you're not familiar with those two forms of illustration, but I just want to go ahead and leave you with another tip. Coming from an illustrative background, the easiest way to think about isometric projection is based on surfaces or planes. If we were to look at this cube that we originally started with here in isometric projection, really we have three visible planes. We have our top plane, our left plane, and our right plane. And it's really easy to simplify objects in isometric projection down to just visible planes. So in the next lesson, we're going to continue on. We're going to take a look at one form of illustrating using isometric projection, and that's using an isometric grid.